Good evening to all the members who have joined us for this CPE seminar on a very wonderful topic, a topic which we are going to discuss outside our scope. No income tax, no GST, something which is quite different. It is the art of negotiation. Today in this era, we are entering into a lot of contracts, and the most important thing is winning is something which is very crucial. So there is some soft skills which is more required, and the way you deal with it and all those things, where there is a lack among many of the youngsters today. So to give it a clear view as to how we can go ahead on this, today we have with us a wonderful speaker, R. Balasubramanyam, fondly known as Mr. Balu, who is a chartered accountant and a management accountant by profession, a fellow designate of the Indian Administrative Fellowship, Karnataka Administrative Reforms Committee, consultant, the Nudge Foundation, an advisor and a leadership coach with a flair for public speaking. He's been a financial professional for over 28 years, and he has an experience in industries ranging from technology and operations, banking and financial services in various board and chief financial officer roles. A Toastmaster for over 7 years and past president of the Banjara Toastmasters Club. Actively contested and won public speaking contest in Toastmasters up to division level. An avid public speaker, storyteller, and a writer. He has written over 100+ articles on LinkedIn on topics ranging from finance, economics, industry trends, leaders, and humor, adopting simple storytelling techniques. His area of expertise is communicating complex finance, economics, and leadership aspects using simple storytelling techniques. He has been a guest speaker at various MBA institutes, set up Manthan, a business storytelling session, at Fidelity, Monday morning stand-up sessions to communicate global national business events of the week. With these words, we are here to listen to CA Balasubramanyam, who will teach us many of the art of negotiations, as his profile says, in a unique storytelling way. Sir, the session is over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Surajit. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I think you have set the expectation very high. You've used the word storytelling almost 3 times. So that has set the bar. It put a lot of performance pressure on me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Good evening, all the attendees. It seems odd that I'm just speaking to myself here. I can't see anyone. And being a public speaker, one of my cues and where I really get motivated is audience in the room. So unfortunately, I think the last 2 years has been devoid of real audience. But that's okay. I'll try and do my best. Let me first do some quick checks on whether you can see my presentation. Selva, can you see my presentation?
No, sir. No, not yet. The third button, right to the orange arrow mark.
Sorry. So
I'll take the right and will give you back.
Okay.
Now you should get the small pop-up like show my screen. Yeah, now it's visible.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. So my topic is going to be the art of negotiation and contracting. So before that, I think Happy Navratri. It's a Saturday, lovely Saturday evening. Happy Navratri to all of you. We're discussing a wonderful topic.
It's not in the slideshow mode, sir. Is it?
Okay. Is it okay now?
And now it's in slideshow mode. Yeah.
Okay. So before I start, let me sort of tell you what is out of scope. What I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about. I'm talking to an esteemed colleagues of mine, chartered accountants, finance professionals, finance leaders. So you're all experts in costing, pricing, taxation, GST, all of that. So one thing I'm not going to do is really preach to the choir. So I'm not going to talk about any of those things that I just mentioned. So bear with me. You're not going to hear any of those terms. I'll probably share my own experience, a few use cases about the art of negotiation. And art of negotiation, when I say art of negotiation, it could be buying, it could be selling, it could be marketing, whatever, right? So, and also I'll touch upon some aspects of contracting. I would say some blunders in contracting and some areas that we probably have to watch out when we get into contracts. So these are the 2 broad areas I'm going to deal with. So before that, I want to sort of tell you a story. So I grew up in Bangalore in the 1980s, the early 80s. The only entertainment those days, I'm sure some of you could relate to it, those born maybe around that time, the only entertainment was black and white TV, and the only TV station was Doordarshan. And Sunday evening, I think it was Sunday afternoon, there was a popular television series called Vikram or Betal, where I'm sure all of you either have seen it or read about it, where the king Vikramaditya would go and pick up the Betal from the graveyard, and the Betal would tell stories. At the end of the story, as soon as Vikramaditya asked a question, Betal would disappear. Right? I am now going to do the opposite. If at the end of 60 minutes or 90 minutes there are no questions, I am going to disappear. How about that? So gentlemen, I think make sure you engage me, you ask questions. You're free to drop your questions in the dialog box, in the chat box. My friend Selvi is going to help me with that. I'm more than happy to stop and clarify. I just want to put it out there. I don't want this to be a monologue. Let's keep your questions coming. Growing up in Bangalore, I talked about growing up in Bangalore also was nostalgic for me for a few other reasons. And I'm sharing this picture that you see on your screen. Some of you, again, born in that generation, can relate to this. This was the barter system of trading that existed prior to 1980. When I say barter system, there used to be these vessel vendors who would come on, steel vessel vendors who would carry the steel vessel on a bamboo basket and walk the streets. So when I was a kid, typically during summer holidays, these guys would, April, May, they came along in my street. As soon as he passed my house, my mother would tell me to run and fetch him back. And his name was Amar Bhai. So Amar Bhai would quietly come back, deposit himself in front of our house, and he will start showing his wares, the steel vessels. And my mother would get excited with all of those steel vessels that she saw. So what unfolded in front of me as a kid then was an amazing buying and selling transaction that took place. My mother would initially give him the old cotton clothes, cotton shirt, cotton pant, and then keep looking at that shining steel bucket, saying, "Give me that." Obviously, it didn't make sense because Amar Bhai didn't see a value in cotton shirts and cotton pants. He would just look at it in this way and say, "Che che amma, idella waste cotton batte. Jari sire itra kudi." Let me translate that for you. This is Kannada. And some of you probably picked it up. Most of you from Tamil Nadu. He would say, "Amma, give me silk saree with that golden thread. I will give you this shining steel bucket." Of course, my mother delayed it. He refused and he got angry and he went away. After about half an hour, Amar Bhai would come back again, by which time my mother cooled down and said, "Okay, I'm going to give you one silk saree." And he would give the steel bucket. And the deal was done. Friends, why am I telling you the story? My earliest lessons of the art of negotiation was learnt in those days when my mother used to do this deal with barter deal with Amar Bhai. The lessons that I learned, I don't think any MBA class or any other academic class would teach you. What it taught me was 3 fundamental lessons in the art of negotiation. The first one is obviously have lots of patience, tons of patience. So in this case, if you see, Amar Bhai had a lot of patience to sort of argue with, debate with my mother and not really get angry in the initial stages. My mother had a lot of patience too, to really have this conversation with him, give him a cup of water, make those small talks, engage with him, and then let the deal flow through. So the first lesson was really have lots of patience in any negotiation. The second lesson was do not put all your cards upfront in the first shot. So if you observe, if you follow that story, Amar Bhai did not put the steel bucket upfront. He obviously showed small cups, plates, small vessels, and my mother too initially offered cotton clothes. The silk sari came much later. So the second lesson is either you're buying or selling. Do not put all your cards up front. Do it one by one. Gauge the situation, gauge the mood, gauge the people in the conversation, right? Last one. The reason that deal happened was because, of course, there was a trust and relationship. Amar Bhai used to come to our streets for almost 10 to 15 years. My mother knew him, and Amar Bhai knew not just my mother, he knew our family, he knew me. And the deal happened because there was trust, there was emotion, and there was also importantly win-win for both. Amar Bhai found some value in those old silk saris. And therefore, in return, he gave us shining steel bucket. And for my mother, it was a sari that she had probably used for 20 years. And she saw some value in giving it away and securing the steel bucket, which she had for many years. In fact, she even put our family's name on it. We still have it. There's a lot of emotion that is attached to it, right? The third important lesson is no deal, no transaction, no negotiation will happen if there is no win-win. Well, you might win a or not deal without a win-win, but it's not going to last. It's going to break away either because something happened or the trust broke, or they found another price point which the competition was willing to offer, and they will walk away. Well, negotiation is in our blood. We negotiate all the time. When we are growing up, when we are children, negotiated for so many things. I'm sure all of you can relate to this. Be it going on a school picnic, be it going getting your favorite cycle, or going bunking school and getting some money and going for a movie, right? How did we achieve that when we were young? We adopted hunger strikes. We emotionally blackmailed our parents, right? That is negotiation. We grew up. Fast forward, we went to college, we went to school, we went to college, and we started doing deals with our friends. Deals to copy in exams, deals to have your attendance being proxied by your friend. What was that? That was a negotiation. Then came marriage. And some of you probably can relate to it. Blackmail works. You want to marry a favorite girl or a boy that you liked, you blackmail your parents. Emotionally blackmail your parents. Or your parents want you to marry somebody in specific, emotional blackmail works, right? You came to work. Then you started using your position, influence, title to get things done. Sometimes power, sometimes direction, right? That also worked as a tool to getting things done. Then negotiating with the boss, negotiating for promotions, negotiating for increments, pressure tactics. I'm sure all of you know this. Well, with the boss, I'm afraid it doesn't work all the time. It depends on who your boss is and how does he behave and how you behave towards your boss. Well, I'm sure some of you do this on vacations. We do negotiate on roadsides, and brutal bargaining works. And I'm reminded of a trip to Hong Kong that I made. This was about 15 years back. Made this trip to Hong Kong, and sorry, can you see the presentation?
Yes,
Is my
sir, yes.
presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So this was about 15 years back. Those of you who are familiar with Hong Kong or who traveled there can probably relate to this. So I was on work. We had finished our work. So evening we were strolling through the streets of Hong Kong, back streets of Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, by the way, is known for street vendors. If you go to downtown Hong Kong, they're full of street vendors. And if you thought the Indian streets, like some of those busy streets have street vendors, believe it, it happens in Hong Kong too. So while I was walking, and I'm a big Dasara doll collector. Now I have a huge doll collection. Some of you probably can relate to this from Chennai. So I spotted a fat Buddha. One of the vendors, street vendors, was selling it. So I wanted to buy it. So of course I went to the vendor. He did not understand English. He was obviously speaking Cantonese or something. And I asked him how much. He took out a calculator and typed 50 Hong Kong dollars. I said 50 is too high. I just walked away. Then he came behind me and said, he typed another number. He said $30. So I took his calculator. I typed $5. When I did that, this vendor became extremely abusive. He was so angry. He was saying something in his local language. Of course, I didn't understand. And I just decided to walk away. After about 20 minutes, we happened to circle the street again. And there he was with the fat Buddha in his hand. And again, tempting me with another price point. He said $15. Then I said $10. My fat Buddha deal happened at $10. Right? Familiar? All of us do this. Art of brutal negotiation. Friends, blackmail, emotion, crying, fasting, threatening, they all worked. When we do this either as kids in school, as maybe boys and girls in college, as maybe in our personal life with marriages, maybe in our teams too, sometimes works with bosses, sometimes doesn't, and sometimes brutal bargaining on the streets. But when it comes to professional work, which all of us represent, either your business, your practice, or your companies, none of these actually, well, some of this will work, but you really have to pick up a complete set of different skill sets. So let's talk a little bit about, in the world of business, we are negotiating all the time with the ecosystem. The most obvious negotiation, because we are finance people, we are costing, number people, we obviously negotiate with your suppliers. We negotiate with our customers. Of course, we also negotiate with investors. With India getting so much of attention from a VC standpoint, from a funding standpoint, from private equity standpoint, there is negotiation happening with investors all the time. And as finance professionals, we are in the middle of that negotiation. We negotiate with competitors, right? Negotiating on market share, strategy, competition strategy, price points, alignments, all of that. M&A is all about negotiation. I don't need to say much about that. As I already spoken, we negotiate with the boss. Negotiate with whether these days work from home or work in office, or negotiate with your boss for bonus and increments. We negotiate also with your team in terms of deliverable, loyalty, whatever you call it. And of course, regulators, depending on which sector you are in. But if there's one thing that thread that runs through all this, everybody wants a good deal for themselves, irrespective of which side you are in. The supplier wants the best price, the customer wants the best price, the investor wants a stake at a lower price. While if you're on the other side, you probably want to take a premium. You want to compete. You want a favorable competition environment. You want the best M&A deal. Everybody is negotiating for their own benefit. Nobody wants to give an inch. But unfortunately, most deals happen, most successful deal, sustainable deal happens when there is win-win for both. So what I'm going to talk about here, and at this stage, you can ask me questions. You can type it in the chat mode, and I can pick it up. Selva can help me sort of relay the questions. I can take some questions. So what I'm going to talk about is broadly some key principles that underpin the art of negotiation. And most of them, as you observe, are behavioral, right? First one is whether you are buying or selling, whether you are you're negotiating with a regulator, with your investment partner, with your doing an M&A, do you prepare adequately and strategize? Do you know what you're buying? Do you know what you're selling? Do you know what is your market share? Do you know what is your competition? Do you know your price points? Do you know how much you will actually consume? Do you know the pricing trends? Do you know who the vendors are? What is going to be your negotiation strategy? Is it going to be just price? Is it going to be quality? Is it going to be support after the product is sold? Is it going to be brand? Is it going to be reputation? Right? Most often, and don't get me wrong here, as finance people, when we get into negotiations, we often spend enormous amount of time in commercials. What's the costing? What is the price point? What is the withholding tax? What is GST? What is the procure to pay cycle? What is the payment terms? All of that. All of that, believe me, friends, is good hygiene. But the point I'm trying to make is, do we consciously look into what is it that we are negotiating? What is my negotiation strategy? Say, for example, if you are leading a procurement function of a large company and you have a procurement function, your bandwidth is limited. You could be dealing with 1,000 vendors. You could be buying 1,000 categories of products and services. Do you know what is your top 10 spends? Do you know your top 10 strategic customers? And then do you know which one you are probably going to spend enormous amount of time trying to negotiate? Right? Do you really prepare for negotiation? And let me give you an example here. I used to work with a company called Fidelity Investments. We ran transport for employees, employee transport. We had close to about 7,500 people. We were using about 7 to 8 vendors, transport vendors in 2 locations, Bangalore and Chennai. We spent close to about $4 million every year on just transport, employee transport, right? For almost 10 years, the contract with all of these 8 vendors were auto-renewed. Nobody asked a question. We didn't really know anything about the spend pattern, right? So about 6 years back, I got curious. I said, we are spending $4 million here with 8 vendors. Let me try and understand. I realized that understanding this sector takes almost about 3 to 4 months. Really, if you really want to understand your spend pattern, who are the vendors, how do they bill, how do we actually pay, and all of that, right? And negotiations, the contract renewals were happening every 2 years. One of the things that I observed was happening was we would actually wake up just about 2 months prior to the rollover, or even 1 month prior to the rollover, and we had no time. And all of the 8 vendors said, if you don't sign a contract, we probably will not give you service. And then given transport was such a key important service for us, we couldn't afford that. So then I decided, let me start 1 year prior and prepare and strategize. What am I going to negotiate on? And then I realized that the finance team didn't really understand the space at all. And very fundamental things that we did, and try and understand who are these vendors, what is the reputation, how is the pricing, how are they billing? Is it based on kilometers or is it based on trip? What is the cost per trip or cost per kilometer? What all does it contain, right? When we started asking ourselves these questions, we realized that there's a lot more analysis and preparation that we need to do from our end. We spent almost about 6 months trying to mine this contract, understand data patterns, then realized 3 things which fundamentally changed the way we approached transport cost. We said, out of the 8 vendors, we actually don't need 8. We need 6. We dropped 2 because of reputation reasons, driver quality, driver issues, all of that, which was probably not even looked at in the past. The second aspect was we went away from trip-based billing, rather the kilometer-based billing, to trip-based billing. And obviously, the reasons were obvious, because kilometer is susceptible We can't really measure kilometers. There's a lot of pilferage there that was happening. We redefined what a trip should be, and we priced ourselves based on cost per trip, which fundamentally changed cost behavior. Third was really about what does the cost contain, right? We made it an all-inclusive cost. Earlier, the insurance was out of the cost, was not included in the cost. A lot of the other expenses that was incurred around the driver's wellness was not included. We said, look, I don't have the time to manage a lot of the other expenses on your behalf. You price it in. We are going to have an all-inclusive cost and do it as an outsourced service, right? So that changed the whole definition of costing and what all cost is included, and of course reduce a lot of our work. The most important thing we did is the way this whole spend was handled. We automated the whole thing, brought in an app-based billing, automated from the time it is booked to time it is paid, and because of which we said we don't need a 25 people transport department. We need just about 3 people, 1 in each location. The reason I am bringing this up, friends, is really about often we get caught up in pricing, costing, taxes, payments. We don't step back and look at the whole spend as an area and what is the strategy that we need to adopt in spending. Let me pause here if there are any questions at this stage. Selva, any questions at this stage?
Yeah. And we have like puja.
Sorry, any questions, Selva, at this stage?
No, sir. No questions as of now. I have requested them if there is any, they can post it, and I'll let you know, sir. And we'll go with the next.
Okay. All right. So let me move on. The next aspect is body language, ego play, cultural nuances in a negotiation. Be it again, I'm generalizing this. It could be buying or selling. How often when we go into large, I'm talking about large contracts, large deals, do we really observe body languages of people in the room, right? Be it a buyer or a seller. Do we know how the room is organized? What is the body language if you are selling that you are sending? What is the body language of the people on the other side? Aspects like ego play. Who's the decision maker? What's the ego play in the room? Cultural nuances that happen. You know, this happens especially in cross-border transactions. Understanding culture, understanding the nuances of culture, which has a huge bearing on the way the deals are negotiated. And let me give an example here. This is a live example. This was about 7 years ago. We used to have an office in China, in Dalian. This was about 600 or 800 people. And we were actually looking at, when I worked in Fidelity, of course, we're looking for a benefit administration payroll vendor, a local vendor, because they understand they had to be a local vendor because most of them were in Chinese, and local regulations needed a local vendor. So we had a bunch of people from our US office, 2 or 3 people. I was there, a colleague of mine. We went over to this vendor's place, this benefit administration vendor. He was local Chinese, and considering he didn't understand English and we didn't understand Mandarin, we had an interpreter. So a lot of the contract legwork had already happened. We had sort of gone through. This was really about meeting the owner on the other side, really going through the final contract summary and just signing off and shaking hands, right? So as and when the interpreter started reading out each of the key clauses of the contract, this owner kept lifting his hands and doing this, and he had a very, very serious face. So this was happening for about 1 or 2 minutes, and we wondered whether he's agreeing, he's disagreeing, or he's unhappy about something. And then curious, we asked the interpreter towards the end, because it was almost about, we had about 6 or 7 clauses that had to be read out, and each of the parties had to visually consent. We got a little worried. He's doing this, and what does this mean? And then when we were towards the end, the interpreter said, in the local language, and apparently China has different ways of saying thumbs up. The American would say thumbs up, and we probably will also do this. They had this concept of doing this with a straight blank face, right? So it's only then we realized that he's actually very happy to agree to these clauses, and he wants to bond and have a relationship with us, right? So the reason I'm bringing it up, sometimes cultural nuances play a big part. And I'll give another example. I dealt a lot with North American financial services. I also working with Deutsche Bank, dealt with a lot of Asia Pacific, Japanese, Indonesian audience, partners and customers. One of the things I learned initially was, when you're talking to an American, so for example, you're talking to somebody in New York or Boston, they don't want you to get into the business, into the weeds of the transaction or whatever you're trying to tell them, product, service, quality, and all of that upfront. The way to build a relationship, the way to break into a conversation is really getting to know them. Talk to them about American football, talk to them about Red Sox game, talk to them about some sport that they can relate to, right? And then you slip into a transaction. So they like small talk. Unless you break the ice with some of these US financial services, or for that matter, US customers, you're not going to go too far into the deal making. They need to know you as a person. And likewise, you talk to them about Sachin Tendulkar, you talk to them about Rajinikanth, you talk to them about what's happening in India, Modi, etc., and all of that. They want to know, right? And then you get into a conversation. Again, let me contrast this. If you're dealing with a Japanese customer or a Japanese vendor, they mean business. You've got to be on time. You probably have to be on time 5 minutes prior. You have to get into the business in the first minute. They don't have time for small talk. They don't want to know the weather in Tokyo. They don't want to know how much Sachin Tendulkar scored. They can't even relate to it, by the way. They're not interested in your global view on global affairs. They mean business, right? Unless you understand these cross-border cultural nuances, sometimes it's hard to break through in large deals, right? The other one is the ego play. Often I have seen people, this could be again sellers, buyers, they walk into meeting rooms or boardrooms thinking that the tallest and the smartest and the guy with the coat and suit is a decision maker. He's going to make the decision. He's the leader. He's the senior most in the room. While the reality may be the shortest fellow may be a leader in the room. So how do you pick up those cues, and how do you gauge the ego quotient in the room? Often becomes important. And for that, friends, there's a lot of homework that needs to be done. You need to, again, of course, as I said, prepare, strategize. You need to know what you're selling, what you're buying, what you want in the deal, what is a deal breaker. Also do mapping of the people whom you're talking to. Map the organization, map the department, know the people in the audience prior. If possible, build relationships, right? Yeah, I'm going to pause here. I'll take a sip of water. Any questions at this stage?
The one question now, it's getting displayed, right? Is my screen visible?
Does the rule of the automatic change? Well, not really. The fundamental aspects of negotiation remain the same. Do you think customer always have an upper hand? Well, I would say my one-line response is customer is the king, right? If you are dealing in a service or you are dealing in a space which is highly competitive, unless you're in a monopoly, I would say customer is always the king. Customer definitely has an upper hand, because in today's age of digital, social media and all of that, one irate customer probably can go and spoil the party for you, right? So a lot depends on your position as a seller, your market share, your ability to influence price point, and influence in the market as well. Say, for example, telecom services. If you look at mobile telephony and all of that, it is a customer-driven market, very price sensitive. In the last 2 years, I'm sure Airtel has been trying to increase prices. Vodafone, of course, is struggling. They desperately need to increase price, but they can't, because it's so sensitive. The market is so price sensitive. Customer has a say. They want to walk away. They have options. Even if Airtel increases the price by 5%, within a span of 48 hours, people are going to move to Jio, right? So you're right. It depends on the market. It depends on the product or the service that you're selling, right? But let's flip the other side. If you look at service like cloud services, for that matter, if you go back 3-4 years ago, Amazon had absolute market share. Customer had no choice. They pretty much own 90% of the cloud services market. You got to pay them what they demanded, right? But of course that's changed now. You have Azure, you have Microsoft, you have Oracle. Everybody's jumping in, right? So customer now is starting to have a choice, right? So it's a fine balance between what you're selling, your market share, and all of that. I hope that answers the question. But I would say the fundamental aspects of negotiation probably are founded on principles of more of behavioral and the approach and all of that, which I described. Great question. Okay, let's move on.
1 minute, sir. We have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Is it visible?
Yes, I can see that. When does one walk away from deal during a negotiation? Should we still try do the deal with the hope that we will make a loss or a deficit next time? Well, I can give you a generic answer, and I also give you a specific answer. Well, I think it depends on if you are selling something, either a product or a service. It depends on a few aspects. How desperate are you? Two is, do you see making a loss-making deal currently and in the future hope to gain market share, or you feel the buyer has more potential and he's probably going to give you more business, or you feel this is an entry into a company which probably has a much larger group or maybe a global multinational. You can mine the account and sort of make inroads into that company. And in that case, you sort of lead with a loss and then hope to gain market share. The specific example I want to give is very off the press. Tata is buying Air India, right? For the government, if you look at it, they have taken on almost 45,000 crores of debt out of Air India's balance sheet, and it's gone into Government of India's books. And if you ask me, just based on sheer numbers, that's not a great deal for the Government of India, right? But why did they still do this deal and do this deal in a span of 18 months? May 2020, the deal was announced, and the deal is concluded this week, right? The reason is, I think it made, taking into account the aspect of 8,000 crores Air India is burning cash every year, given the fact that the government's strategic decision is to exit from running a loss-making airline, not to be saddled with sort of a white elephant. They went in probably with a short-term deficit. It's a losing proposition in the short term, right? In the long term, they're probably saving a lot of valuable dollars, right? So very, very subjective. It depends on your vulnerability, your opportunity that you see, and all of that. Great question. In electronic world, how do you negotiate? How does it work since it is not personal? Oh, hold on to that particular question. Electronic world, I will probably talk about it a little later. I'll come back to this third question. All right, so moving on. So often as yeah, I'll show my screen.
The percentage is given to you.
Okay. The third point I want to make is we are finance people, we are chartered accountants. Again, don't get me wrong. We are perfect with our facts, our Excel sheets, our presentations. We spend a lot of time preparing, knowing every number on that particular sheet. Very thorough. But do we think about emotions involved in negotiations? Right? Very, very important. Human element in a negotiation. Right? Rather than me talk a little bit about that, I want to show you a video. Selva, can I request you to show the first video, please?
Can we play that video now?
Selva, can you play the first video?
Yeah. I'll play the video now. One minute.
Thank you, Selva.
So,
Right. I hope that video was self-explanatory. Often it's the words that we use. How do we express ourselves? Right. Sometimes it's about the words that we use, the emotion, the expression. Right. And that speaks a lot, and not necessarily the facts and data and all of that. So the point I'm trying to make is sometimes we put a lot of effort with a lot of left brain, intellectual, fact driven, but we tend to miss the emotion. And people typically either buying or selling, while there is a lot of analytics that they do, emotion plays a big role in how much you buy, from whom you buy, right? And at what price points you buy, right? Okay, the next one is sometimes I've seen we offer too much of a choice and we confuse the hell out of the customer or the buyer, for that example. If you go onto some of the websites, there are multiple products, multiple channels. The web page is really crowded. I have a hard time really choosing. Or for example, I walk into a restaurant. They have a menu card with about 50 pages. I have a hard time even selecting what I want to select. Of course, the intention is offer variety, but in an effort to offer variety, we make the choice difficult. And here I want to really talk about the coffee bean, spelling the coffee bean syndrome in between. So I'm sure all of you have gone to these huge malls, right? And some of the the shops in these malls, say for example, you have this lifestyle or all of these huge malls. As soon as you enter, you find typically at the entrance is the perfume section. And if you observed how they smell perfume, they have various brands of perfumes. They have 100 brands of perfumes, men and women. And one of the things that you realize this, the sales guy there, as he offers you different perfume brands, of course, he puts it on your wrist and you keep smelling. So as not to confuse you or get you to differentiate between a smell of one perfume, one brand and another, he gives you coffee bean in between. And why does he do that? He wants you to forget the experience of the prior brand and be ready for the experience of the new brand. And that's a wonderful way of differentiating with too many choices that you have. And if you contrast that with the car models these days, for example, Maruti or Toyota or whatever, multiple models. You have a VX, you have a ZX, you have a VXX, ZEY, whatever. As a customer, what does the choice mean to me? I'm confused. I don't know which one to buy. And the only price differentiate sometimes seems to be the price point, right? So often we have to differentiate or make the choice easier, differentiate our product lines, service lines, and make the customer smell the coffee bean in between. And this happens. I'll give an example. Often when large companies like IBM or Microsoft, they pitch for large ERP contracts or large software management contracts. A lot of these large companies are replacing legacy vendors, and when these guys go and pitch for this business, half the conversation is about the company bitching about the legacy vendor, right? And that is of no use to anyone. An IBM or a Microsoft who wants to come into this business and take this account is not interested in this whole bitching story, right? And that's where the coffee bean syndrome comes in. They'll have to make the company forget their legacy, bring in their offering, play up their stories, talk about what they have to offer, rather than engage for a long time in hearing the sad story of what happened in the past, right? So that's the coffee bean syndrome that you need to bring about. Very subtle. You have to really manage it. You need to be clear on where you're going to break this, take the conversation away, distract the conversation away, and take them to a place where you want them to. Take them to an experience that you want them to hear, right? Next one is, I think somebody asked about, are you is the customer always on the upper hand? The question you need to ask yourself is, in every negotiation, buying or selling, are you negotiating from the position of strength or weakness? In most of the cases, it is very clear, either it is strength or weakness, or it is somewhere in between. You don't have enough data to determine whether you're on this side or that side, right? So let me give you a classic example. An example in the very close to our heart. Examples in the way armies negotiate. All of us have been clued into what's happening in the LAC, in Leh and Ladakh, Pangong So. Around August of last year, the June event had happened, the Galwan event had happened. Things had got very dirty between the Indian Army and the PLA. Both of them had amassed troops. And on the night of August 29th, till that date, the whole world was saying India is beaten. India is on a weak wicket. PLA is almost intruded. They have taken half of a finger 4 or finger 5, whatever they call it. Right? India is on a losing ground. We cannot negotiate. We have lost our ability to negotiate. We have ceded territory. lot of it was spoken in the public domain. But something changed. India never negotiated. Of course, they never got to the negotiating table. They played hardball in Galwan, right? They never came to the negotiating table. Though China wanted them to, they were playing a negotiation. They're playing a mind game there. But India never went to the negotiating table. But on 29th of August, the Frontier Force, which is a covert force which reports to the PMO, it's all public information. It's about, I'm told it's about 8,000 troops. On the night of August 29th, they occupied the Sangrur Heights, close to Finger 5, overlooking the Chinese buildup. All of you know this. Just about 10 days later, everything changed. The reason I'm bringing this up is exactly what played out was, when do you really get into a negotiation? In the Indian Army, the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Defense, and the Indian Army got into the negotiation table after occupying Sangrur Heights. Essentially, they were negotiating from a position of strength and not weakness. So the timing of negotiation is equally important, and that is a choice that you need to make. You make the choice based on, again, product, service, competition, timing, who's on the other side, what's the ecosystem, what's my product, what is my strength, what is my weakness. Let me pause here. I think there's a question. Right, Selva? Is there a question?
No, sir. Not as of now. If
Okay.
there's any, sir, as of now, no questions.
Okay. The next one is often in negotiations, we want to give them what we have, either product or service, without understanding what the customer wants or what the seller is looking for, or what the buyer is looking for. This is very akin to a pumpkin. If you thought you're selling a pumpkin, you'll be amazed. But if somebody is looking for a pumpkin as a whole, somebody may be looking for a skin of the pumpkin. I'm not interested in what's inside. I just want the skin. Some of them may be interested in the pumpkin itself. They're not interested in the skin. They want the flesh. Some of them want the seed. Right? So how often do we think about what does the customer really want, and sell what they want, or buy what I need? Let me give a classic example. And I was privy to this again, partly in my stint with Deutsche Bank and Fidelity Investments. We were negotiating for a large HR management and benefit administration and payroll. This was not just for India. This was Asia Pacific region. Of course, it was a large deal. It was close to about $12 million deal. So we were buying, and companies were talking to us. We had about 3 or 4. Huge process. It takes a year to sort of finalize a vendor. Many of them, and of course, the way Fidelity and Deutsche Bank are organized is there are multiple departments who get involved. We often underestimate that. Say, for example, in case of a HR system, if you are selling to, say, for example, IBM, I'm just making it up, or if you're Infosys for that matter, if you are selling to the HR department, or you're making a presentation to the HR department, the HR head is only going to be concerned about what is the ease of using my tool, how easy is it for my employees to navigate, right? And do I have all the features in it? Is it end to end? I don't need to be going to multiple places. It's one-stop shop for my employees. My employees are going to be extremely happy. Ease of using is the best. My focus is ease of using if I'm a HR head. If assuming you're selling to a risk guy, he's going to say, look, what is your reputation? Who are you? I'm going to give you 1,20,000 employees data to you. How do I trust you? What is your reputation? What are your risks and controls? How do you mitigate information security? Right? Again, if you are speaking to the information security head of say, for example, Fidelity or Deutsche Bank, he is not going to be bothered about price or ease of use or your controls in the process or whatever. All he's going to say is, show me your systems, show me your information security controls. Where do you store your data? What is your data strategy? Do you have a cloud strategy? Can I come and audit it? How do you ensure that my database cannot be hacked? Your database cannot be hacked. How do I know it is fail proof? Right? If you're talking to a finance guy, which most of us are, you're going to be bothered about what it's going to be costing me. Do I have the budget? How are you going to bill me? What are the taxes? What is the cost of service? If you're going to talk to the payroll head, he's not going to bother about any of this. He's going to bother about what are the features, how is my payslip going to look at, what is your tax calculation engine, how does it work, what is the process involved, what is month end, full and final settlement process, onboarding process, blah 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 blah. If you are talking to a procurement guy, he is only bothered about, he is not bothered about any of this that I just said. He's only going to be bothered about, boss, tell me what is it going to cost and how are you billing me, and how does it compare with the competitor set. Right? A classic case of a pumpkin that each one of them has seen very, very differently. So if you are that large HR vendor, you have to be very, very clear in what song you are going to play where and how. One song, one tune, one tape probably will not work all the time, especially in case of large deals. Second one is long menu cards don't work. I think I gave this example of a restaurant. Some restaurants, and if you've gone to some of the restaurants which I have been to, a few of them, they have a very, very simple menu card, just about 3 pages. Very, very clear, descriptive. This is what you get. In case you want to know more details, you can refer the later pages. But sir, these are the highlights. These are our top picks. And you know what? 80% of the cases, and you see this in Taj and overall, they do it very well. Very, very simple menu cards. And in fact, now I think they also have a small light on top of it to help you actually read. And then 80% of the customers who walk in F&B, they end up picking what is on page 1, page 2, page 3. Right? The reason I'm saying this is also because of the days of websites, product selling, website selling products, apps selling products. In the world of digital economy, it's important how you're organizing your products and services. How does your web page look? How is it easy for the customer to navigate? If if you're selling to a price sensitive customer, can the website or the app, whatever you call it, can I organize it in the order of price point? Or if I'm looking for quality, can I organize the data and see it in the order of quality, or make, or color, all of that, right? And I'll give a quick example here. I'm sure some of you or all of you have gone into companies which sell wall tiles, the bathroom tiles and wall tiles. They do an amazing job at to make the choice so simple for the customer. And this is as recent as this week. I went to Somani Tiles in Bangalore, and somebody told me, Somani has got a huge display arena. You just have to make a visit there, and your choice is simple. So I went there. The place is so well organized. As soon as you enter, you feel you are entering a huge building, entering your home. When you go inside, there are multiple variants of a washroom, multiple variants of a kitchen, right? And then you choose where to go. And the moment you go there, you have everything laid out there visually. You can see it. And then on the walls, you can actually change the color. Same pattern, change the color. and then make your decision. Moment you make the decision for the combination of the wall, the flooring, the other fittings, the bathroom fittings and all of that, and then you can order. So what an amazing way of making a tile selection, the plumbing item selection, where I think choice is almost, of course, yes, a lady makes the choice, but the color and the make and the texture and the quality is so important, at the same time so confusing. But Somani has made it so simple. They made it so visual. They made it so quick and crisp that deals happen very quickly. They don't spend too much time trying to explain all of this. It's out there. Everything is there, right? Let me pause here. Any questions at this stage? Salva, any questions at this stage?
No, sir. 1 minute, 1 minute.
Sorry?
Right, just this one. 4th one.
How can we create value when differences occur? Do you agree to split the value? Sir, I'm not able to understand this question. How can we create value when differences occur? Do we agree to split the value? I'm not following. If you can give an example, that will help me.
They might revert with.
If you can get back with an example, that will probably help me relate to it. Otherwise, it's too generic. I can go either way, but example will help. Okay, let me move forward. The next one is again large deals. Most people think deals happen when I walk in, when I make the presentation, when I explain about my product, service, whatever, buying, selling again. Often large deals, large customer deals, especially M&A types, investing, strategic alignments, M&A. There's a lot of socialization that needs to happen. You have, because the reason that happens is not so much because of ego play. I would say the organizations have become so large these days, so compartmentalized, so siloed because of its size and geographical location, and of course now the complexity is also working from home, right? You hardly meet anyone. Large deals happen with a lot of prior socialization. You have to make sure, you have to spend time, effort to make sure that you are talking to some of the key people either on the buyer side or the seller side prior to the big meeting, and sort of make them feel comfortable, socialize the transaction, gain market intelligence. Big companies do it all the time. They're always out there. In fact, some of them have specific departments which are gathering market intelligence about products, services, even before they negotiate. And I don't want to name the company, the top 3 or 4 or 5 IT companies in India. They do that all the time. Because they're dealing with Fortune 500 companies, which are themselves complex. They are multi geography, multi product. Unless you know the organization's psyche, you know the key decision makers, you know the influences within the organization, and feed that information back, intelligence back to the dealing team, the deal team, there is no way you're going to make headroads into the organization. So invest time, effort in gathering that intelligence. And 2, as finance people, we lead organizations. Some of you may be heads of finances, or financial controllers, or CFOs. Most of the deal making, if you observe, on the selling side is either done by the selling team, and of course the buying is done by the procurement teams. How often in large deals, if you're the CFO or head of finance, do you really try to build a relationship with your strategic buyers and sellers? Right? Often we underestimate that connect, professional connect of picking up the phone, talking to the CFO on the other side, and sort of using that channel to conclude a transaction of a buying or a selling that you probably will be doing. This happens all the time. The key is, I think, being deliberate about it, using those channels, and in a positive way, in the right spirit, of course, to conclude deals that probably are not progressing. If you have a buyer on this side, you have a seller on this side, they're not agreeing on some contract clauses, you sort of bring in your CFO Connect. The next one is, this happens all the time. You are trying to make a presentation, either about selling again, buying. There's always that one complaining Kuppuswamy in the room who is going to pull you down all the time. He is going to take you to, he wants you to go to slide number 18, column number 3, row number 15, and say, please explain that calculation. Friends, complaining Kuppuswamy you cannot avoid. I think I guess the thing is, they're going to be everywhere. In every organization has a complaining Kuppuswamy. I think what you could do about it is deal with the complaining Kuppuswamy outside the room. You don't have a choice. You have to satisfy the Kuppuswamy, otherwise he is going to be your deal breaker. Right? Very common, it always happens, because there is the nagging person who will say, look, I know this inside out, I am going to make him look bad in front of 10 people, and that is going to be a deal breaker. Right? The next one, a famous statement by Ronald Reagan. This was during the height of the Cold War between the US and Russia in the early 1980s. Trust but verify. We are auditors, we are chartered accountants, we are finance people. A lot of transactions, a lot of contracts, purchase orders get signed. Most of us trust the process, either because we are too lazy, or we don't have the time, or we are busy with other things. It's important to trust any deal, any transaction, but have your own ways of verifying, validating in your own way, in whatever way you want to do it, to make sure that nobody takes you for a ride. Moving on to some common contracting blunders. Typically contracts are long-term, 3 years, 5 years contracts. Again, generalizing for both buying and selling. Common blunders that we often commit. Just doing a time check. The unfortunate part is nobody reads key contract clauses. It is only the lawyer who's drafting and the lawyer on the other side who's reading. Otherwise, nobody reads the contract unless the contract goes bad. Universally true in 90% of the cases. Nobody reads the lengthy contract. It's boring. Like, the legal language is boring. It runs into pages. It sounds the same. And often, we look for commercial payment terms, taxes, and okay, that's it, done. We only wake up either when there is a blunder, there is a dispute, there is a claim, or you want to terminate. Otherwise, the contract is in a sleep mode. It is kept in a very nicely bound file, or these days, I think it's even digital now. Nobody reads it. So do make it a point to be armed with, if not all the contracts, your top 10 contracts, both customer and vendor contracts, and be aware of your key contract clauses. And why do I say that? I say that because you're not reacting when the events that I just mentioned happens. You already know by the tip of your finger. You know how to react. And I'll give an example here. And I think some of you probably followed this story. There was this ship called Evergreen. I think it happened in Jan or Feb. It got stuck in Suez Canal. It was there for almost about 7 days. Global trade, logistics trade, shipping lines across the Suez came to a standstill. Ships started piling up on both sides, from the Asia to the Europe side, Europe to the Asian side. I think it was $8 billion of trade was held up on both sides of the Suez Canal. Well, Evergreen was having a spa in the Suez Canal area. Till such time, nobody had read, the companies involved, of course, companies across the globe, had never read, most of them had not read what is an implication? What does this mean? This ship is stuck there. Of course, the containers that were on Evergreen, big issue. Nobody knew what will happen to them. What about the ships on the other side? So what about the ships on this side? What about the cargo that they were carrying? Right? So nobody had an idea of how to deal with this situation. What was the loss? Who will bear the loss? Is this even claimable by the insurance? Is there any pecuniary loss arising out of this delay? And who is going to foot the bill? Why? Because, of course, nobody envisaged Evergreen would get stuck. And two is nobody had read the contracts. Then everybody started in a, the lawyers around the world, they got into details and then realized that some contracts did have the situation, some didn't. Right? So often we land up into these situations. So be well aware, be armed with your key contracts. Second reality, true in most cases, friends, lawyers don't conclude contracts. They're incentivized, they are paid to poke holes into contracts. Either they're representing sellers or buyers. They are paid not to conclude, they are paid to highlight issues in the contract. You have to do that, wearing your business hat. Often I've seen at the leadership level, the deal is done, shake hands, fine, fantastic, all is well, champagnes are exchanged. But then 1 year later, you ask people around the management team, this the lawyers are still talking. They still haven't concluded. They've hit roadblocks on contracts. They're ready to come to an agreement. Oh, they have this big issue of information security, data privacy, all of that. So unless as finance leaders, we understand contract language, we understand pricing, we understand risk measurement, we understand business. Unless we get in to resolve contracts, if some of the clauses are not resolvable, park it aside and move on. Find ways to do that. Those decisions the lawyers will not take. You have to step in, right? So be aware, especially large strategic contracts where law firms are involved. I mean, this has nothing to do. I have a lot of respect for lawyers, but then they're not paid to conclude contracts. Next one is keep it simple and updated. Lot of contract language today is standard language. You have master services agreements, you have standard contract templates which run into pages. But when you ask a simple question, what is the payment terms? People are blinking. What is warranty? We don't know. I don't know which page. I have to search. In case of pecuniary loss, who bears the loss? Don't know. What are the INCO terms? Oh, what is income terms? I don't know. What happens if there is damage in transit? Oh, it's in page number 84. I have not read. Let me read. Right. So often some of these important, valuable, intuitive aspects of contracts are not simplified and updated. So make sure your contract templates have some of the key clauses that is relevant to your business. Of course, I mean, I'm only generalizing it. You could be in e-commerce business, you could be in manufacturing, you could be in auto, you could be in minerals, you could be in services, whatever, or IT or whatever, or professional services. Make sure you have a library of the top 10, 15 key contracts terms, and make sure it is in a very simplified, understandable language, and it is upfront, not lost in page number 84, 94, whatever. And keep that updated. I have seen a lot of contracts where price points are not updated, or taxes are hard coded, withholding taxes or GST or whatever service tax in the past. They're hard coded. Nobody knows price. Years have lapsed. It's a long-term contract. We are still paying the same price. And believe me today, and the risk actually gets accentuated because most of the procure to pay process is outsourced. It's probably managed by third parties. And most of the P2P draws its rates from the contract which are preloaded. The rates are drawn from the contracts. Contracts are long term, and sometimes all the buyer is doing is just clicking on the product. The price is pre-populated, right? And the price, if the price is not updated in your masters, you probably are picking up the price point of 2018, and the prices have changed, and you're not updated your contract. Because you're not updated your contract, your procurement prices are not updated, right? I've seen this personally happen, and then everybody wakes up, and then there's an audit, and then you realize that you're paying some outdated prices. The next one is when it comes to contracting, often we don't look deeper into the organizations that either we are selling or buying from. For example, when you are selling transport services, or when you're selling insurance services, or even if you're a hotel and you're selling hotel rooms, do not stop at the company that you're dealing with immediately. Say, for example, if it's a Tata Group, and if Oberoi Hotels is selling to Tata Group, they will Tata Group, of course, is going to aggregate demand. They're going to say, look, I have Tata Steel, TCS, blah blah blah, so many group companies. When I talk to Oberoi Hotels, I mean, actually, it's a wrong example. When they would be staying in Taj. Let me pick an example of Tata Group negotiating with mobile bandwidth services, right? They are going to aggregate demand, and they are going to talk as Tata Group to an Airtel or a Jio, right? So similarly, when you are selling, do not stop at the entity that you are dealing with. Look deeper, broaden that relationship, deepen that relationship, go upwards into the holding company, go downwards into global subsidiary chains, or go into their own group company chains to mine business. Know your rights, liabilities, total cost of ownership happens all the time. You exit from certain contracts. Say, for example, you have contracts with lawyers, IT vendors, or M&A vendors, advisors. When you terminate, you make sure you know your rights, you know your liabilities, the intellectual property that is with them are handed over. Make sure that those contract languages are very, very clearly spelled out, roles and responsibilities, because these days I think data privacy is key. When you are terminating and walking out of a vendor, you have to make sure the data is secure, or the data is ripped out and you walk with the data, right? Next one is total cost of ownership. And when I say total cost of ownership, is often when we sell products or services, we forget that there is warranty liabilities, there is servicing liabilities, there is liabilities because of damage, reputation, blah blah blah. Really have a total view of the total cost of ownership view, not just a price view, and that will probably change your decision. Force majeure is at your doorstep now. Till the pandemic happened last March, nobody knew an event like a pandemic, a shutdown like a pandemic, is actually force majeure. And everybody woke up. A lot of the legal contracts didn't really define the shutdown as a pandemic shutdown as a force majeure. That's a reality now. So the whole world, the legal world, the corporate world, the contracting world woke up and actually saw force majeure. Nobody otherwise bothers about what is force majeure. It was left as something at the end which very few lawyers understood, and I don't need to understand. No, that's a pass. And today, if you look at malls, landlords, large tenants, corporate tenants, everybody is going through the force majeure clause. Why? Because that's become the most important clause for walking out of tenancy, giving up space, or claiming for damages, or absolving yourself from your responsibilities because you couldn't deliver something. Next one is global contracts. Some of you may relate to this, working in global companies. Most global contracts, most large companies conclude certain contracts at a global level, either because of global relationships, or because of privacy reasons, or because of familiarity, or because of certain strategic connections. Often, when it, say for example, there is a subsidiary of this global company in India, a lot of people I have seen, especially finance people, spend a lot of time trying to change the key clauses in the agreement locally. The way most global contracts are structured is price points, legal aspects are probably not even negotiable at a subsidiary level. All you have to be focusing on is the operational aspects of the contract. How much of the quantity of the service do you need? When do you need it? Quality of the product, all of that, and who's your local vendor. So do not burn midnight oil trying to fundamentally change global contracts, because there is a larger strategic reasons why it's concluded that way. Look at exit clauses. I think I spoke about exit clauses in the context of rights and liabilities. Very, very important. We often ignore that, and therein lies a lot of the liability that comes with it, especially large software contracts. If you terminate, and if the data is not protected, or you have fallout issues out of that, or for example, you have issues, customer claims arising out of a delivery that happened during the prior contact. In most global contracts, the liability comes back to the person who delivered it. Have you provisioned for it? Are you even aware that the clause exists? Or are you waking up when that billions of dollar demand comes through? All right, I've come to the end of the presentation. I'm going to show more videos, and that probably answers one of the questions that somebody came up, and I'm probably going to deal with that. Can I now request the Selva to play the second video, please?
ये मैं, ये यूसुफ, लंगोटिया यार सी मेरा। लाहौर में हमारे घर के सामने एक बड़ा बाग था। उस बाग का गेट बाबा आदम के जमाने। रोज शाम को हमने वहाँ पतंगे उड़ानी, और उसके बाद जाके यूसुफ के दुकान से झझरिया चुरा के खानी।
झझरिया?
और मेरा साहब नमस्ते।
नमस्ते, मेरी पोती मुंबई वाली।
और बेटे क्या हाल है?
बचपन की तंग गली फिर से कूदे फांदे, छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे।
हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
फाजिल स्वीट्स?
हाँ जी। दादाजान, दिल्ली से किसी की कॉल है।
हेलो,
यूसुफ अंकल?
कौन?
जी मैं सुमन बोल रही हूँ दिल्ली से, आपके बचपन के दोस्त बलदेव जी की पोती। याद है बचपन में आप दोनों झझरिया चुरा के खाते थे?
बचपन की तंग गली फिर से कूदे फांदे, छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे। एक पतंग सा उड़ता था परिंदों की तरह, परिंदों की तरह, परिंदों की तरह। एक दौर था मन मन मोर था, एक दौर था मन मन मोर था।
पार्टीशन के वक्त हम रातों रात हिंदुस्तान आ गए।
दादू?
यूसुफ दी बड़ी याद आती।
कागजों की कश्तियों में डूबा रहता था, झांकती खिड़कियों में उलझा रहता था। वो भी क्या दौर था, मन पे न जोर था। एक दौर था मन मन मोर था,
हाँ जी कौन हैप्पी बर्थडे यारा यूसुफ वो यूसुफ वो मेरे बल्लू यूसुफ यार
Thank you, Selva. So this I think I'm sure some of you have seen this video. This was about 14 years ago. I love this this ad by Google for the simple reason that they've used the emotion of partition. They've used the emotion of friendship, and you also see the next generation, getting involved. And what are they selling? They're just in a very subtle manner. They use the emotion to really talk about Google search, the power of Google search. A brilliant ad. This particular ad connected with millions and millions of people, and it's a wonderful example of how an emotion like a partition, a friendship across generations, and how beautifully, how subtly they've really talked about the power of search. I found this fascinating. I thought I should share with you. Somebody talked about product differentiation. How do you differentiate? How do you split the value? I just want to show one more video, and where in this digital world, where we feel there is a war for eyeballs. People have attention spans that last a few seconds. It's completely digital. People are distracted. You don't know whom you're selling to. There are millions of people with smartphones. How do you get their attention? How do you tell them about your service or a product? How do you get them to listen to you? Whom are you selling to? Whom are your customers? Right? It's absolutely crazy. It's a faceless customer. Just watch this next YouTube video, and then and we can talk. Selva, can you play the third video, please?
What the public saw as magic was actually a carefully orchestrated feat of technology. We mounted an ADS-B antenna on the roof of a nearby building to read live data directly from each aircraft's transponder within 200 kilometers. All aircraft emit radio waves containing their speed, altitude, GPS location, and a call sign. Our antenna was connected to a PC with a custom-built application, which identified the British Airways planes and sent the data to our cloud server that controlled the billboards. We created a virtual trigger zone in the sky that acted like a tripwire, so that when a BA plane entered our trigger zone, within 0.2 seconds we'd cross-reference the registration number with flight data from Heathrow to determine the destination. Cloud altitude data told us if the plane could be seen, and if it could, the information was sent to our billboard, interrupting the current content and playing our ad. We targeted a moment. The moment a plane flies overhead, inspiring our audience to share what they saw and igniting their passion to explore the world.
Thank you, Selva, for that video. So another classic case of many things really are amazing here. One is, I think, the way British Airways used the technology. I mean, you can see it for yourself. A phenomenal use of the power of technology. The second aspect is carefully orchestrating whom are they selling to. And if you observe, they are selling to the heart of the child. They got the child excited. They observed that the children love to see flights taking off, and they played into that emotion. And they sold to the child in this case. And what happened? And the fact is, post this, of course, this went viral. People shared it across the world, millions of views, and bookings went up by almost about 18%, I'm told, over the next 3-4 years. And this was done when British Airways was actually losing market share. And what a brilliant orchestration of technology and really thinking through on who their customer is, and really appropriately negotiating with the child. That's exactly what they did. They negotiated with the child, not with the parent. But then the result was people booked British Airways, right? Somebody asked a question, value splitting, and I'll give you a little story, and then I'll open it up for questions. I'm sure most of you know this. There's a shop called Babusa Silk Saree in Kanchipuram. He's the biggest, he's the most popular, he's apparently very reputed. So I was there last year, and I observed that there are many fake Babusas who probably are trying to destroy the authentic Babusa value of a silk saree. And of course, I also got almost duped because the auto driver took me to another Babusa, which was a fake shop. And then sense prevailed and realized we came back to the original Babusa, and there's only one shop in Kanchipuram. And those who have gone to Kanchipuram and gone to Babusa will know this. I realized when I walked into the shop, they have carefully orchestrated the way they are selling. Right from the time you enter, they have a separate floor for each price point. The first thing that hits you is they sort of filter you on your price point, and then 2 is range, and 3 is who is selling to you. The reason I'm talking about the third one is the first 2 are no-brainers. I think every silk saree does it. 90% of the sales people there are men, and 95 or 99% of the people who come there, buyers, are ladies. Very carefully orchestrated. Of course, we spent almost 2 hours there, and I won't tell you how many silk sarees my wife purchased. And I was talking to him on the sideline, a guy called Karthikeyan, I think. So I asked him, why is this men are selling silk sarees? Then he said something very interesting. He said, sir, only men have patience to deal with ladies for 3 hours, 4 hours. Ladies don't have this patience, and they will destroy whatever value we have. Don't get me wrong. I think that's the strategy, and it's worked for, I believe, 40 to 50 years. Often value is in the eyes of the beholder. I think it depends on how you project your value, various ways of doing it. How do you orchestrate it? How do you strategize around it? I'll stop at this. I'm now open for questions.
Fourth question. Is my screen visible, sir?
Oh, yes. Sorry, say it again.
The fourth question, sir. You said
how we can create value when differences occur. Do we respect the value during negotiation facing differences? Create value from it. It's a very generic question. Unless there is a specific example, I think it's hard for me to give you a general answer. And I can give you a very generic answer, but it will not serve the purpose. my immediate thinking is, if you take pride in what you're buying or selling, and you believe in it, I wouldn't urge you to split the value, right? I would say, look, this is the product I have. I can always come back and take feedback and enhance the value of the product. But splitting value, I'm not able to relate to the question. Maybe an example would help. Can we move to the fifth one? The client came to e-file his return, but the systems were not functional. The client started arguing with me that somebody is doing the job easy at a free of cost. How do you go about this type of negotiation to conclude in our favor? Good question. I guess this is the value. There are certain controllable things that are non-controllable. It always happens. You're dependent on a system. You're dependent on an architecture that you don't control, and your customers are walking away. It's a price point. But if the system is the same and the competition is also using the same, I think it's a matter of time when the client will realize that. I think you should be clear in your own architecture, your own systems, processes, the value that you add. Of course, I'm not saying let go of your customers, but if you're confident you have a fairly well thought out process, and there are certain dependencies that you cannot help, in that case, I think no point in arguing with the customer. You politely let him go, let him or her go, and you stick to your value proposition, hoping someday the client is going to learn the hard way and come back to you. I would not advise arguing with your client, especially if it is for something that is beyond your control. Something like a e-return, which I'm assuming is either a GST system or a income tax system. You cannot control that, my friend. Well, I think the great question. How do you break deadlock in negotiation, especially in financial contracts? Well, I think the easy way to do this is take a break. Agree to disagree. Have a lull. Have a cooling period. Rethink, reorient. Give some time for both of them. Do not break relationships. Maybe this contract you don't get it. Maybe the next contract he'll think of you because the quality of the relationship you built, the value of your proposition, the way you conducted yourself, they will always come back to you, right? So my quick limited answer is, when you feel you're hitting a deadlock, and you can feel that, both parties can feel that, it can happen either because several rounds of meeting, the points are still unresolved, right? The first strategy you adopt is not get emotional. It's probably step back and look at a little bit of detail. You or somebody else sort of look at a level of detail that probably the issue is more in the depth or in the understanding. Give an attempt to let somebody else actually come in and deal with it. Otherwise, I think it's good to sort of give a break, step apart, give some cooling time, rethink, repurpose, recalibrate, and then and probably talk about it again. The one golden rule is do not burn bridges.
So those were the questions. Okay, I'm done with the questions.
All right. Any other last questions before we conclude?
Yes, just wait for 1 or 2. Wait for 1 minute. So, not so we can wait.
All right. Thanks, friends, for listening to me. I hope it was useful. I had a great time actually talking to you, sharing some of my experiences. I wish to thank ICAI Chennai for giving me this opportunity. I now hand this back to Selva.
Yes. We'll wait for 1 more minute. We'll see any questions comes up. If not, so we'll wait.
Sure. Yeah, I'm open. If anybody wants to ask a question, I'm
One
open.
question, is it courteous to bring small gifts to a meeting?
Sorry?
1 minute, I'll just flash it on the screen. Seventh one.
Great question. I think it's a little to do with practice and culture. Say, for example, if you're dealing with a financial services, global, multinational, and you're trying to conclude a contract in India or in the Asia Pacific region, it is a token gift is okay, but I think if the values are significant, or if it is seen and perceived as wanting to influence the transaction, normally most large companies have ethical practices. They'll politely refuse. I think you'll have to gauge the situation. I think the purpose behind it, the intention behind it. A lot of companies, especially people which have certain products or services, or products, for example, they actually take pride in bringing a sample of the product and giving it to a prospective client. That's fine, because at the end of the day, it's your product. You have pride in giving it as a gift to somebody. But if it is started with some expectation, especially the value, the number, the quantity, size, and all of that, and the seniority of the person that you're dealing with, you have to be extremely careful. Sometimes, if you're dealing with a senior person who's probably not looking at these things in a very ethical manner, or if he feels this is defying his ethical framework, you would probably lose the deal on that day when you try to hand over that gift. You're probably better off being very professional and sticking to what is the purpose of your meeting, and not really offer gifts. That's a call that you probably have to make depending on whom you're dealing with, their values, how well you know them, and the value of your gift. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Seems to be a last question, sir, and we thank you on behalf of SIRC for your excellent sessions. Thank you. So, any concluding remarks?
No, good. I think this was good. I hope it was useful. Any feedback, any comments? I'm more than happy to get it through your office.
Yes, sir. We'll share it over mail, sir. Feedback and comments, whatever we receive. Okay. The session, along with the recording, we'll share it with the attendees, and also we'll share the recordings to you over the mail, sir. With the thanks, sir. And the feedback.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Selva. Thanks for all your help. I know I've given you a tough time. Thanks for all of that, and thanks for the work with the video.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good night.